Welcome to Galway International Arts Festival's Vinyl Hours series. I'm your host, Tiernan Henry, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this podcast episode. In this series, we get to sit down with festival artists and musicians to discuss the soundtrack of their lives. You can listen back to all episodes via giaf.ie or find Vinyl Hours on any podcast platform. Well, welcome to First Thought, a podcast by Galway International Arts Festival. I'm Tiernan Henry, host of the festival's Vinyl Hours. And Vinyl Hours is a series of conversations with artists and creatives tracing a musical journey through the soundtrack of their lives. Tom Waits reckons that songs are just interesting things to be doing with the air, and on Vinyl Hours, we think talking about them isn't too shabby either, and even if it is only a little bit of bravado. You'll be able to listen to the full playlist on Galway International Arts Festival's Spotify page. And if you like what you hear, please consider making a donation to Galway International Arts Festival, a non-profit organisation bringing the arts to people in Ireland and around the world. Head to giaf.ie and click Donate. Today's guest is Anna Mullarkey, and Anna is a composer and a performer. She's currently working with Brew Theatre. She's made music for documentaries and for theatre companies. She plays with My Fellow Sponges and Big Jelly, and she also performs under her own name. And she released her debut album last year, and it's a gorgeous collection of songs. So if you don't have it, please buy it immediately. But for today, we're here to talk about some of the songs, tunes, and music that moves her. So without further ado, enjoy Vinyl Hours with Anna Mullarkey. Anna, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, it's lovely to be here. Thanks, Tiernan. Delighted.
You're welcome. And yeah, so listen, it's a fascinating, distinctive list of songs that you've given us, and it's a real invitation into what makes up your musical headspace, I guess. And I suppose what I really like about this list of stuff that you sent is it's really eclectic, but it's bookended by two completely and utterly distinctive voices. They're entirely different, but they're so distinctive, I think, as well. And I think, particularly when I listen to your album, I go, oh yeah, I can see, and not copying, but just the influence of the spirit. Let's put it that way. And people will get to listen to the tunes anyway themselves. So thank you so much for doing this. It's lovely to talk to you again.
My pleasure, Tiernan. Great to be here.
Good. Great. So I suppose we jump right in, and your first choice is from 2004. And I remember looking at this, of course, again, is how many of these songs are not bang up to date, but they're timeless, I guess, is one way of looking at these things. The dates don't really matter all that much. And it's from Björk's fifth album, and it's almost entirely made up of layers and layers and layers of voices. And I remember there was a great quote that she said about it at the time when it came out, is that it's folk music without any folk musicians attached. So it's all about the voices, I guess. And the song is Submarine. So we'll play a little bit of Submarine. So the song Anna chose was Submarine. So tell us about Björk, Anna. And you and Björk, or Björk and you.
Well, if I'm to be honest, I actually discovered Björk through my older sister, Mia. So Mia would have been listening to Björk, and I would have kind of heard outside the door, who's this that she's listening to? And that was when I was, I think I was fairly young, like preteen, and
right.
Yeah, I was just blown away by the sounds that Björk was making, and like never heard anything like it ever. And I just feel like she seems to be able to push the boundaries of music in everything she does. Like, it's even her new work now, it's like, it's different time signatures, the keys are interesting, the instrumentation, it's always an exploration. She's never just like, I always feel like she's really trying to create as much truth from herself as she possibly can, and it's just so beautiful. Yeah.
And I suppose, like you said there, you probably found her through your sister. Was there a lot of music in the house? Like, were you hearing a lot of things anyway when you were growing up?
Yeah, definitely. like my dad would have always had music on when he was cooking food, and we would have all just sat in the kitchen listening to like Johnny Cash and like other like Jethro Tull.
Okay.
Yeah, love Jethro Tull. If I could put more music on, Jethro Tull would be there. Yeah, so we would have like all sat there and listened to a lot of music. And then I definitely discovered music from my older sister as well, as I would kind of just try to figure out what she was doing. Little younger sister, copying the older sister when you're young. Yeah.
But I suppose I always think that a lot of the stuff that you hear sort of in your teens, or probably just like you were saying, you're probably just preteen, but a lot of the stuff I think that you hear that around then almost becomes part of your DNA in a way, because you immerse yourself so fully in it, and because that's what you can do when you're 12, 13, 14, 15. You can completely give yourself to a piece of music or a song or an album or a CD or whatever, and it just 10 years later, 20 years later, when you go, oh yeah, I can still sing every single note of everything on that, and I know all when the cymbals come in or when the piano comes in, all those things.
Yeah, I mean, the formative years, like, it's pretty amazing how much it affects your later life, like, and the interests you have. And would have listened to a lot of Tchaikovsky as well. That's another person who is not on the list. But yeah, I spent a lot of time listening to the Nutcracker, like, and like just total immersion, as you're saying, like, and you don't have this, concept of like to-do lists. You're young and you're completely in it, which is so wonderful. It's actually what we strive for as adults, is actually to get that again, to be so totally immersed and at one with something, is something we work on, like.
And I suppose the other great thing as well, and you can certainly see that with Björk and with Tchaikovsky as well. When you think about that at an early age, you're fearless as well as a child, because it's just new, so you don't feel, oh, I can't listen to this because it's classical music, or I can't listen to this because it's awkward pop, or it's whatever it is. You just sit there and absorb it, and go, no problem. So, I mean, it's a lovely thing, I think, to be exposed to that kind of. In a way, it's like the democracy of music. In a way, that it's there for everyone if you can. And it affects everyone completely differently, but it's entirely democratic in lots of ways as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that there's a movie called Fantasia, which is like that cartoon with classical music by Disney. And what's wonderful is, we loved that when we were growing up. We watched that a lot, and it's great because it's like really accessible. It makes Stravinsky's Rite of Spring something that you can actually connect with, and it's not this scary music. I think sometimes some of that music is a bit intense at a young age, but something like Fantasia really lets children engage with it. I think in such a wondrous way. So yeah, I think that definitely helped the classical journey.
Great. And I suppose just kind of carrying on in a way, because your second choice is it might be, I suppose, kind of people might think of it as a bit of a body swerve if you want, but it makes perfect sense as well. Like there's no voices in this; it's a tune, but there's no voices in it. But the music itself, it's entirely alive and it's giddy, and it's in Galway. So that's The Road West from Martin O'Connor, and that's from 2001. And obviously Martin O'Connor is really well known in Galway. He was in Skylark, Midnight Well, in Dedanan as well, and the Boys of the Loch, obviously. But there's also another connection with Anna. So tell us about you and Martin.
So Martin was my neighbour when I was growing up, and it was, pretty amazing, like, getting to see some of these tunes, like, while he was writing them. We'd be at his house and we'd have the opportunity to hear some of these tunes. And he's a very, very wonderful person, and his family are just wonderful. They're the O'Connors are just fabulous people. And Kira is actually on the album playing fiddle and cello, and she does it fabulously and amazingly. There's a new word. That's a terrible word, Anna.
That's the title of the second album right there.
Amazingly. Nestle as well. It's not just Leslie, it's like Nestle. So Kira is on the album, and I'm just a big fan of the O'Connors. I just think they're amazing. And living beside Morchin was really inspiring. And, I don't, trad is something I really would love to get a lot more of. And I just really respect and love it. I think it's got a soul of its own. And I think Morchin carries that in a way that's really still, it's old, but it's new, because he fuses, Baroque music in, he fuses other genres into it, where it is fundamentally traditional, but it has these elements that can kind of sway you in another way. And The Road West is just definitely one of my favorite albums of all time. Yeah,
and again, I mean, I think people might go, "Oh, Bjork to Martin O'Connor," and I think it's, as I said, I think it's this lovely mix of. There's a huge amount of freeness in both of those tunes that you've picked, and a huge amount of space as well. And I guess then, just when you were growing up, then with kind of, you're listening to music in the house, and you're in and out of next door, in and out of your place. What were you playing, or were you learning to play instruments at that stage?
Yeah, I was actually learning to play the piano. Now, I didn't, at a young age, I didn't care for it. I was like, whatever, I just want to play outside. So my discipline in the instrument did not come until I was a young teenager. But I was lucky. I mean, it's great, to have, even not, if you're not interested and you're young and you're just doing the half hour a week, it's still more than not doing it. So I'm grateful for it. I was learning the piano, but wasn't learning trad. But it was just really great to hear it. I think listening is probably the most, what I would consider one of the most valuable skills of a musician or a composer, because you're just engaging, and I think, some of the best musicians that I know are just great listeners. Like, that's, Morchin is taking in, I feel like the Road West is the Road West. My really good friend Sive, she listens to this album as she's going out to Boffin, and she's on the Road West, and it's like, true, you're driving and you're looking outside and you're like, yeah, Morchin has he's articulated what it is to drive the Road West and to really listen to it, and you can feel that.
And I suppose that's exactly like, when people talk about aspects of classical music where, like, say, even like something like the Nutcracker, you listen to music and you go, yes, that's exactly what it is. Or even the Rite of Spring, where you think of some aspects where you think that's exactly what birds, those are the sounds that birds make, or that's exactly the way they move, So picking up, I suppose it's reflecting, isn't it, rhythms of life, those kind of, whatever the rhythms are around us,
Yeah, and I love that, because you are, I suppose, reflecting and listening, and I think, Morchin does this in spades in that album, where he reflects this sort of, I feel like there's like an autumnal vibe to this particular song. I can just see like the shades of autumn, and but they're actually, it's the burn, it's like you're driving past and you can see these colors, or it's the rugged landscape of Connemara, like
lovely. Okay, well, we go on, because otherwise I think this could go on for about 8 hours the way we're going. But if you were talking about kind of autumnal, I think the next one is definitely kind of late nights and summers, are definitely warm weather. This is from 1998, and it's Nicolas Godin and Jean-Benoit Dunkel formed the band Air in 1995, and their debut album came out in 1998. And you've picked Talisman from the album, and there's a lovely balance here in Talisman of this kind of gorgeous melody that is woozy, and then there's this slightly off kilter keyboard, but it also kind of has a Bond villain kind of aspect to it as well. So
Love a bit
what
of
is it
Bond.
about
Yeah.
Air then? What is it about Air, and particularly this track that it attracted you, I guess, you know?
I'll tell you what. I tell you what now. So when I was like, just bringing out the country in me. When I talk about Air, I remember listening to 0 7, and I think 0 7 was how I got onto Air. I love 0 7. Amazing music. There's so much amazing music. But that was kind of like the bridge into Air. I don't know how, maybe it was like some algorithm that brought me onto them on YouTube. Pre Spotify. Yeah, they're just, I mean, the mixing, the blend, the instrumentation, the song structure, like I think it's definitely one of the best albums that I've ever listened to in my life.
Yeah.
And it's just so balanced. Like I think you said that, like it has this, it goes and it sways up and down, and it's the way they move and just the use of synthesizers in it. Like it's like a masterclass in synthesis. Like they know what they're doing. Like they understand synth. They understand how to blend them. Yeah.
And I think I like about it as well, it's so unhurried. It just feels like it's happening, so there's no
Yeah.
force in it at all. And you kind of think when it's over, you think, how long was that? Was that 2 hours, or was that, 3 minutes, or whatever it is,
Yeah. Yeah. It does have it. It's like timeless. You're stepping into space, like, but it's like a whole different space. It's sci-fi, but it's not fully sci-fi. Like it's still earthy. It's grounded music, but yet it's very ethereal. It has such a great blend. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And then, because it's kind of interesting, because I had a little quote written here. It's just because your first choices, that and I suppose what certainly listening to your album as well, I always think this about your album is that those first ones, so Bjork and Marcin and Air, and from your album, there's these you've created, and the others have created these landscapes of sound. So they almost, and coming from I'm a geologist, so I think it kind of this in topography and shape and 3 dimensions. But I
I
remember
love
that
that.
Kieran Carson wrote this framing of landscape of Irish tunes. Now he was talking specifically about, say, Irish tunes, but he conjured up these images of maps and guides as a way of approaching it. So he just said, like, every tune is almost its own landscape. And you might come in on this road, but someone else might come in on a completely separate road, but it's the same tune. So everyone will have a different perspective on it, even though the tune is the same thing. And I suppose, in a way, what I'm getting with this is where your next choice is by someone who made these astonishing musical maps, which is Philip Glass. So how did you get to Philip Glass?
So Philip Glass, I was very fortunate to have an amazing piano teacher, Elena Gecker, who really took me under her wing and nourished my skills so much. Like, she was an incredible teacher, and I think the value of her teachings was just, it's made me who I am, to be honest. And I remember I started getting interested in composition, and I was about maybe 16 or 17, probably 16. And I showed her some pieces that I had composed on the piano. And she really wanted to nurture that. She really wanted to, like, help me understand what I was doing and maybe help inspire me. So she gave me Steve Reich on Trains and Philip Glass The Hours, 2 CDs. And I forced my family to sit and listen to those CDs with me. They had no choice. But it was, amazing. And absolutely love Steve Reich as well. Really, really love him. But listening to The Hours kind of was a game changer for me, I think. Like, Philip Glass's music, it felt like, yeah, okay, I'm listening to, it's like Tchaikovsky, you can hear, I feel like the harmony in Tchaikovsky, it's like this modern development from what classical music was into where we are now, like talking about that reflection and the listening. I think Philip Glass does that in spades, where he reflects what a modern society is, but through sound, you know. And Aquinas Scotzi is a great example of that, where he has a blend of like just amazing instrumentation, reflecting on the flux of life and how it changes and the pace we're in. And so yeah, listening to the hours really got to me. It really affected me, and I really wanted to learn everything I could about Philip Glass, and I found it very hard to listen to anything else for about a year. And read Mrs. Dalloway. Couldn't watch the hours until I read Mrs. Dalloway, listened to the soundtrack, and was very pedantic about it. And yeah, I suppose I wanted to learn, like, what was his process? How did he get there? How did he write this music? And what was he reflecting in this movie? Yeah, so that was yeah, Philip Glass. My journey with him will never end. He's great. Love him. Yeah.
It's kind of brought up a couple of things, I suppose. There's a concept in education theory called threshold concepts, and I struggled with this for a long time. And then you figure it out. And what they say is that there's something that you're learning or doing or engaging with, and then it's almost like a penny drops moment. But you will. And it might be a concept, and I would say it sounds like this for you with Philip Glass, with music. Once you accept or take on this new thing, it completely changes absolutely everything about the way you listen. So your world, you go through a gateway essentially, and your world will never be the same again. You know, but it completely and utterly changes the way you think about whatever the thing is. So it could be about music, or it could, or education. But I think I really like the idea, because I think sometimes you do hear it, I think, with music or with books or with films, I think, where you go and you go, right, this is entirely for me, and this makes perfect sense to me. And I think it opens new vistas and opens new ways of listening to things, probably, and thinking about things. Which leads me on to a question. You said you'd started composing when you were sort of in your mid-teens. And I suppose that's, I'm always fascinated by this. And I think it takes a huge amount of confidence, I think, and bravery in a way. I would say, to write a piece and then to show it to someone else, even if it is only something that's in development. But when you're composing, or when you were, do you see the thing in its entirety? Or can you see it in your head, or can you hear it in your head in its entirety before you figure out how to make it? If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does sometimes, not all the time. So I think, I feel like if I'm composing for like theatre or film or documentary, I think it's easier to see the bigger picture, because you're kind of being asked to see the bigger picture. And that's, I'm like, cool, I can do that. Like that's great. Thanks very much. And you're given a concept, you're given the characters, you're given, you're given so much. So you're not blind going in. You're actually able to see, okay, well, that character has this sound. The instrumentation would be, it's like you're sort of given the spectrum to see. So it's easier to see when it's work like that. Solo creativity, where I'm writing maybe from the heart or from, I don't know, some other concept, who knows, it is a little bit harder to see the full picture, maybe. And I also don't want to. I think I prefer working a little bit blind, because you're trying to figure it out. I'd prefer in that context to not try to oversee not try to see the big picture before I work. I like that little bit of like, how do we get here? Because that's kind of the fun part of it. But yeah, it kind of depends which way I'm working. Yeah.
Okay. And then I suppose for your own stuff then, when do you know when to stop? And I mean, I don't mean that in a bad way, but if you're composing a piece, I mean, I play guitar, but it's very limited. So I know exactly when to stop, because my ability stops. So that's my constraint. But if you're, say, composing for different instruments, or for different moods, just how does that work? I guess I'm just really curious to see how your process works.
Yeah. I suppose, like, let's say, so I did work for a show called After Love, which was such a joy, and I got to compose for piano and harp, and they're short pieces, they're each of them, I'd say nothing goes over 2 minutes because they're very kind of classical or neoclassical, and those pieces, it's very clear to me when to finish, and it might be similar to trad. You might have an ABA structure, or little variations on that. So you have your intro, and that intro might be the end as well with a mild variation, and then you have your middle. Those pieces are very clear. It's very clear to me when to end. The electronic stuff is who knows? You just kind of feel it out. Just like, is this the end? I don't know. Like, but at least with work for like documentaries or theatre, you're sort of told when to end, which is fantastic. I love that very much. So that helps a lot to kind of go, cool, that's actually it. That's all they need, because that's following what they already have done. So that's very clear. And then I think, like, I feel like the track Douse Them All, like, honestly, I would very happily keep going like with that. I'd actually love to make it really long and just like, keep going. But then, like, for, let's say, for live, you might improvise. So the ending, I think it's all about feeling. Like, how do you feel right now? Like, that's the kind of question. You're like, do you want to end? Yes, okay, let's finish. So
I mean, that makes perfect sense as well, because I know I've read a lot of stuff say about the way Bob Dylan works in studios, and he always just sort of says, well, whatever the album is, what you're listening to the album is what we caught that day or that moment. And he said that was a huge amount of what you're hearing is what I was feeling at that moment, not even just what I was playing, but what was going on in my head. And if I'd recorded that 2 days later, it might sound completely different, because my head might have been in a completely different place, So I suppose
100%.
And I suppose you gain confidence as you gain skills, and you go through, as you say, you go through these processes of working in more formal structures where you're kind of said, well, the piece needs to be X minutes long, and it needs to reflect these things that are happening on screen or on stage. So I suppose it's becoming part. I suppose it's the skills of your practice, isn't it, or the skills of the art?
Yeah, and definitely, I suppose, listening to yourself as well, like, as much as listening to what you're being told is, there. I think there's always that balance as well of, like, are you happy with it? Because if it's not feeling authentic, like, I can't fully change that. Like, I can't go completely out of what I believe is authentic. Do you know? Like, I wouldn't want to. I would always want it to be as close to what I think authentic is. So it's a conversation.
Yeah, I suppose it goes back to, like, what you're saying. It's a reflection of your reflection as well. So I suppose, and again, if you're going to play it live, you want to be comfortable playing it live instead of going, oh, I really don't like this. I don't think I got this right, or
Yeah.
Cool. Right. Well, we go on, because your next track is I just love this, because I knew nothing about it. I had to go and look it up when you told me. It's Swedish siblings Karen and Olof Dreyer, I think it is, and the band or the group is The Knife, and they specialize in 80s influenced electronic music. And the track you've picked, which is great fun, is Heartbeats. So can you tell us about this? Your connection to this?
Oh man, The Knife are so great. Like, I lived in Sweden for a year, and got to listen to some awesome Swedish music. The Knife are just. I mean, Fever Ray is also amazing. She has her solo work post The Knife. Hopefully The Knife will come back. I know that they're, on a break, I think, at the moment. I don't know. But this particular song is actually a cover from Jose Gonzalez' Heartbeat, which is stunning. And I think it's just the way they make it. they have this way of like blending light and dark, like that the music actually has this kind of dark element to it, but it's really fun. And
Yeah.
then her singing is just catchy and interesting, and she has a really interesting voice that kind of really makes you listen to her. I feel like you kind of just want to stop what you're doing and listen because it's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the light and dark's an interesting one, because I think when you listen to stuff either from the 80s or that's very heavily influenced, say, by that kind of sound from the 80s, in a way, the music itself was quite almost binary. It was, the electronics were, this was when stuff was just being developed, and people were really just pushing and learning how to use it and learning to get all these sounds. So you got these really dramatic pop songs. And I think partially it was because people were just learning. They said, okay, what can this thing do when we plug it in and turn it on and start hitting it? What noises will it make? And I think there's such a joy, I think, about a lot of this music as well. But because of the electronic thing, sometimes you can kind of get this, people talk about, oh, it's kind of cold. But I think what it does is it offers you that sort of, the warmth and, the cool maybe is a better way of looking at it than clinically cold. But you're right. I mean, it's there's a really nice mix of things in there. And it's great fun,
So much fun. Like, yeah, if I want to feel good, I just listen to The Knife. But it's feeling good, without it being very happy, which I
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
But you do, there's like, it's fast. It's got a lot of really fun rhythms. It's, 808. It's got definitely a bit of 303. I could just say numbers that are synthesizers because they're awesome.
And so
But it has
when
it
you
all.
were when you were in Sweden, were you sort of teenage kind of ish, or?
No, I was 21,
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
and I was doing my Erasmus. So, yeah, it was really great. I actually bought a piano when I was there,
Wow.
which was amazing. Bertha was her name, and she cost €200. I was very lucky. 2 weeks into my move, a friend of mine said, "Anna, there's a poster there for piano for sale. You should get it." And yeah, it was a great year of playing piano and living in Sweden. Yeah, yeah,
An acoustic piano, was it? Or
yeah, yeah. An acoustic piano. I drove my neighbors mental. Yeah, they didn't. They weren't very happy with me, but I persisted.
oh, cool. And did the piano stay in Sweden, or did the piano come back?
No, piano stayed in Sweden. I gave it to my friend. Yeah.
But that's the kind of music tradition, isn't it? That you hand on instruments. Isn't that a really nice musical tradition, that the instrument keeps going, but in through different hands, So,
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah.
oh, class. That's really good. Okay, that's a, a lovely story. And I suppose there's, because you're a little bit older as well, so maybe were you, do you feel that were you more confident, do you think, by sort of early 20s in terms of your composition, or were you still sort of in the kind of soaking everything up phase?
Oh, I was definitely in the soaking everything up phase for sure. I mean, geez, sometimes I think I'm just still there. I don't know. There's just so much to soak up.
Yeah.
My God. Um, yeah, but I mean, it was only really when I was 23 when I started to go, oh no, actually, I think this is probably what I want to do as a career.
Yeah.
And then it took a while to like develop the skill sets and
Yeah.
the understanding and the technology as well. So, yeah.
And just on that kind of career sort of choice or career decision, um, like how difficult, or how do you create that pathway or find that pathway to sort of say, well, this is what I'd like to do? Is it like being sort of in a band and just sort of saying, well, this is, we'll try and get a single out or get a song out and play. But for composition, is it more complicated? Like, do you have to have a body of work that you create in by yourself before you take it to play, or to show to people, or for people to listen to?
Yeah, I think it is really important to have that. I was very lucky because my sister Mia is director, and she was, beginning her journey as I was, and we worked together, and we still work together a lot. So I had opportunities early on to actually compose to visuals, which was great. And I think, it didn't matter about being paid or not. That's kind of not the relevance when you're beginning at all. You
Yeah.
kind of want to get your money elsewhere because you have to develop very specific skills that take a long time. And it was great. It was very fortunate to actually have that opportunity repeatedly with her, where I got to understand how to put how to put sounds together, and how to use software, because that's like slow. That's instruments are also they take a long time, and so does electronics and software and all those skills that are essential to produce scores or soundscapes or soundtracks. So
And
yeah,
is that
working
like,
with
sorry, no, and just like, when you said that, when you're a little bit younger and your piano teacher, you showed some of your stuff to the piano teacher and she really encouraged you. Were you getting sort of formal, sort of structured training or in composition or around composition, or was this stuff you're largely doing yourself?
Yeah, the only formal training was with my piano teacher, who she did help me understand, what key I was writing in, and
Yeah.
what the time signature was. But no, I wasn't getting any formal. It was more, I think I was probably trying to mirror what I was listening to as much as I could. Yeah, within the capabilities I had. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Fair play to you. Say that. Okay, we'll go on because I'm just conscious of the time as well. And but your next song is Lisa Hannigan's song, and Lisa, I think we've said this before, she seems to have been around forever, and I don't mean that in a bad way. She just seems to have been here forever. And she certainly about 20 years ago, when she started out, she was working with Damien Rice, and since about 2007 or 2008, she's kind of been out on her own. And your choice is from 2008. It's Keep It All is the song. It's from the Seesaw album. Excuse me. So what is it about Lisa that, or her songwriting or her voice or whatever? What is it about this song in particular that you like?
Well, this song, I love how upbeat it is, and it's kind of different from the other songs in the album. It has like this nice kind of drum pattern that's repeated, and the video is great. She's going around Electric Picnic, I think, and it just has a real vibe to it. It's really just fun, and her voice is just so stunning. And I actually got to see her playing at Beyond the Pale last year, and she's just really interesting. Everything she does, I just love what she does. She was playing, I think she was just singing with, she had like 4 singers with her, and they were doing this kind of a cappella, and it's just wonderful. She keeps it fresh and interesting, and Keep It All is very fun, and it's kind of light, but it still has a lot of weight to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think and I think what I think has just been brilliant in Ireland over the last 20 years is the flowering of different types of voices and bands and musicians. That it isn't just sort of, and I don't mean that in a negative way, it isn't just sort of the singer-songwriter traditionally, with the guitar. The notion of what a singer-songwriter can be has been pushed so far. The boundaries have been pushed so wide, and I think there's, again, it'll kind of be reflected in your next choice a little bit as well, but and the capability of what you can do either with the voice and with some simple instrumentation or very complicated instrumentation. I think the landscape is really, really interesting. I think that, and for me as a listener, it's brilliant because you hear all this really good new music, and it's lovely. I think you're right about Lisa, that every album and everything, you just think, wow, where'd that come from? And she works with really interesting people, and And there's always, what I love is there's so much space in the music. It never feels particularly, it doesn't feel overly cluttered. Even the upbeat stuff, you just think, yeah, it's just right, So,
Yeah, the balance is
mm,
fairly sublime. She's
yeah,
really,
yeah,
really great at, you know, working and collaborating with people to create sonic universes that are just like accurate. They're just like,
yeah,
yes, that is all very perfect. Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, because your next choice is the Declan O'Rourke song, and talking about sublime here. This is it's a fabulous piece of music and then song, I guess. I don't quite know how you describe it, but it's really worth. If anyone does listen to Spotify playlist, please listen to this the whole way through and give your time. Sit down for this. So. Um, so it's marrying the sea until death us do part. And so, what can you tell us about this, or your reaction to it, or what it means to you?
Yeah, I mean, this song I feel like it's like Shanos, and it's got this folklore element where, you know, as all Irish, on in Ireland, it's a small island. We're surrounded by the sea, and to a large extent, we're married to the sea. And historically, we were very much married to the sea. Our bread and butter came from it. Our sense of self comes from it. And we have a lot of mythology around it. And I think this song pays homage to all of that. It says, yeah, I I would marry you, and I love you, and you are the bringer of life here, and it's got an emotionality to it that isn't overstated, and I think, but it's so evident. It's really a slow, beautiful homage to, I think, who we are. Yeah, it's a beautiful song.
Yeah.
I love it so much.
And what I it's just it's a fabulous thing that please give yourself time to listen to it, because I think we'll get on to your last choice, which is a great way to finish. And I think, as I said at the start, you've bookended your choice with two really distinctive personalities and really distinctive voices, and you've picked Johnny Cash. And it's I See a Darkness. It's from one of the American albums. I think American too. I think it is. And I know obviously you were saying Johnny Cash was part of your growing up, but maybe you want to could you talk a little bit about that aspect of it, but also then maybe your reactions, obviously, because this is a much more recent Johnny Cash iteration.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many beautiful Johnny Cash songs. It's actually kind of hard to pick which one to kind of put down. But yeah, I guess he's raw and he's honest, and I love that he's human. He's so human. He doesn't hide from it. He's not trying to be, I don't know, like he's not trying to be anyone, because he can't. He can only be himself, and I think that's what comes out. I think it's just like raw honesty about his experience of the world, but
Yeah,
done through the absolute beautiful talent of uh, songwriting and guitar playing, and his voice is so rich and dark. And he just we I was very lucky to grow up listening to Johnny Cash. I think I feel like he's almost like a Shankly. Like he's like this the teller of truths, like, yeah.
yeah. And I think, again, certainly with these American albums, you just think he took all these songs, by Depeche Mode and Nick Cave and Will Oldham in this case, and just think he made them completely and utterly his own. And yet, and I know obviously this is him working with Rick Rubin, but to a large extent, it's really just him and the guitar with some instrumentation around it, but the focus really is just on the voice, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it makes it actually easy to hear the words. I actually, when I listen to music, I find it very difficult to hear words. they just kind of, I can only hear melody. Words are very, I have to have them written in front of me. Otherwise I'm like, I don't know what this is about. Whereas with Johnny Cash, I can actually hear his words because
it's right up there.
There, yeah, you're just like, okay, thank you. Yeah.
And how do you find writing words then? Like, how do you find, I mean, you're back in Windows. Do you write the words first or the music, or do you write the music first and then the words, or does it all, or does it just change? So
Yeah, it kind of goes between all of it. But I think the next project or the next album I work on, I think I'm gonna work with people to write with me, because yeah, I think I prefer focusing on the sounds, but I think I can't help it. Sometimes the purging of words happens, and you can't foresee that. So I just, they have to allow a bit of space for that one. You can't help it. And then sometimes, yeah, you want to sit down and think about, okay, like what does that mean, and then you have to edit it. But yeah, I think I'd love to, collaborate with writers moving forward for sure. Yeah.
Great. Good. Well, listen, Anna, this has been a lot of fun, and I'd quite happily chat to you all day, and we could listen to music all day and whatever, But I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your music and your musical choices with us, and some of the stories as well, and just good luck with everything in the future. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jane. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. For more episodes, visit giaf.ie or find Vine Lars on any podcast platform. Vine Lars is part of First Thought Talks, a series produced in association with University of Galway.